much, and what an honor to be asked to be speaking for this first ever Stowe Talks and our fabulous students. Weren't they great? It's been great. So, one might ask, onions, choirs, bridges, what do these have to do with building strong communities? I hope I can help you know that in just a few minutes here. So, when I was at St. Olaf College, I went home on a break one day, and you have to know this was the 70s. And I had conversation with my father, who was a pastor, my mother, a pastor's wife, and a nurse in a small town. And I really challenged my mother. I said, Mom, what would you do if I bring home a black man and said I was going to marry him? And she said, well, if I thought you loved each other and you treated each other with respect, I'd be very happy for you. And then she looked at me very seriously, and she said, however, Mary, remember, it takes time and energy to really know and love someone who is different from you. In a way like peeling away an onion with layers of difference to get flavor out and to find the common core. So not much after that, I was at St. Olaf, and having a voice lesson with Dr. Ken Jennings at the time. I did make the St. Olaf choir, Brenda. And Dr. Jennings was my voice teacher, and during this particular lesson, I had to tell him I needed to quit the choir because the social work major at the time required a semester of study at Augsburg College. And Dr. Jennings looked at me and he said, it's really okay, Mary. Social work is clearly your vocation, and your whole life you can have music as an avocation. Then he looked at me also intensely and said, don't settle for just singing in a church choir. Now, I'm not sure I knew at the time what he meant. I think I know now. And I must admit, some of my best friends sing in church choirs, right? And some of my best friends is a way many of us sort of hide behind this idea that we're really okay. We like other people. So I'll come back to some of my best friends are in just a little bit. So take time, peel away layers, don't settle. Sounds like a Stowe talk. So what is our human challenge? I think at the moment our human challenge is that we're not hanging together. And we've heard some similar comments about this in some of the other talks today. I'm pretty comfortable with where I am, but I will tell you, I hold to this from Benjamin Franklin pretty often. When he was sitting around waiting to sign the Declaration of Independence, he said, in fact, he implored his colleagues, we must hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately. Well, I worry that we're hanging separately, and I worry that we're hanging with people with whom we are very comfortable. I'm comfortable with my family and my friends. I'm comfortable with many of you. You look like me. You believe in education. You work at things. But it's a lot of the same old in my life. I'm also pretty comfortable when I sing in church choirs. I know the Lutheran repertoire. I know the kind of work we do in them. And it's easy to just sit there as well. What are some other ways we settle? I think we settle in our faith life. I think we settle also in our habits. If any of you have not seen the TED Talk by Eli Pariser about how we, in fact, are getting settled by Google in our news sources, it's the one on the filter bubbles. I encourage you to look at it. We settle also, I think, in our passions. Ole's in your 20s, you're ready. You are ready. And with all of us today telling you what you ought to do, you're ready to change. But as Jim Farrell talks about, people in their 40s and 50s, maybe 60s, start moving from being activists to pacifists. So I encourage you who fall in that latter category to think about what you were activist about when you were in your 20s. And you in your 20s, stay activists. Don't become pacifists. Because we do settle. Social scientists help us know why people settle. We settle for some pretty clear reasons, that we have us and we have them, and there might be some evolutionary reasons for that, social psychology tells us. It's also pretty clear in studies that we have a cognitive preference for those who are like us, for similarity. We rate people like us a little higher and more positively. But I think we also settle for reasons that aren't good, and aren't good for the big C, big G common good. We settle for reasons that allow us to avoid those people who we think of as greedy, those people who are scary, those people who are becoming dependent on us, those people who hate us, those people who are ruining our country, those people who, if we hang out with them, our reputation might be sullied, or those people whom God is not going to save. I get fearful, and I wonder why we settle for that kind of attitude, why we hang separately from the other. There's some explanations from social science for that as well. We do tend as humans to categorize, to discriminate between people. We also have a deep-seated need to belong and to be loved, and that often means to conform and to be like those around us. And when we try to do sort of a stepping across to the other, it's scary, and we become sometimes suspicious. What happens then? Well, I worry. I worry that things happen like this. Christian and Muslim children hate each other. And men and women never make the same amount of money for the same job. And people living in wealth and people living in poverty don't trust each other. And perhaps heterosexuals become increasingly fearful. So when was the last time you heard, "We're in this together"? Last time I heard it was my siblings and I taking care of a wonderful uncle who's aging and needs some assistance. The late Paul Wellstone was heard in many of his speeches to say something along the lines of this: we all do better when we all do better. But instead, I hear all too often, both overtly and covertly, this kind of language. You're on your own. It's not my problem. I'm not responsible for you. And I don't like to hear about yo-yos. Who says that anyway? You're on your own. Well, as I was thinking about this talk, I did find out that people on June 6th say yo-yo a lot, but for a good and fun reason, and I encourage you both, all of you, to learn how to play yo-yo on June 6th. And that might be one way to have things be different. So how can we change this hanging separately, this worry that many of us have? How can we be less fearful and have stronger ties? How can we take more time to peel away those layers and not settle and not be surrounded by yo-yos? Well, for me, I'm a social constructionist generally as well. I believe that we can create a reality that's different from what we have now by changing our behaviors and learning differently. For my mother, it meant taking time to peel away a layer of difference, to love somebody. For Dr. Jennings, it meant pushing and trying to achieve more and not just settling for the music or the artistic that is easy and comes easily, but pushing ourselves. And for my friend Alan Story, who's a pastor in South Africa, a place where hanging separately is known all too well. It's holding to this idea that my greatest difference from you is perhaps my greatest gift to you. So we know what things we need to do in life to make things better, change the world. Apparently now we have to drink green stuff too. We've got a lot we have to do. We have to exercise more and eat organic fruits and vegetables and have safe sex and keep private stuff off Facebook and all kinds of things we need to do. And I'm going to add one more. And that one more is this, that we think about who are those people in our own lives. And that we do what we can to get to know one of those people in the very near future. So if you can look at your life and say, oh, I do that, Mary. You know, some of my best friends are gay. Or I have a good friend who's in the 1%. Or just this afternoon, I had lunch with somebody who's an undocumented immigrant. If you can say that, good for you. Do it again. But if you're one of those people who say, well, I've been to a Latin American country, and I learned to speak Spanish, and I have some good buddies down there. Or that black guy on my team is really good at what he does, and I don't mind that he's part of the team. Or my sociology class is really diverse at St. Olaf, and that's really quite good. I would suggest that you're afraid of adding the flavor. You're afraid of taking the time. I, too, am afraid of adding that kind of flavor. And I'm afraid of taking that time. And I find it easier to settle, and I'm afraid that is dangerous. We are in danger of losing what I think is our common good and what I hope is something all of us are concerned about. So what do we do about this? How do we not settle? How do we not surround ourselves with yo-yos? How do we just zip by and not take the time to know people? I think we find cultural guides, or people I refer to as bridge builders. These are people who know 2 or maybe even 3 communities really well and can help us understand difference. For me, it's my friend Susan locally, who works with the undocumented Latino population here to help the majority population understand some of the strengths and joys of the newcomers in our midst. And it's my friend Dan, who grew up as a Catholic, Southern Californian, who was in the closet and introduced me to the reality of the world of people who are gay and people who are Christian and how we can cross those 2 communities. For you, my suggestion is these bridge builders and cultural guides are right here at St. Olaf, obviously. Somebody in your classroom who is Hmong may have an uncle who is a shaman healer. There might be down the hall in your residence hall somebody who is a gay Republican. We may also have feminist Catholics. And you see my point. People who cross difference and cross boundaries, they're here. Or perhaps you are a cultural guide. Perhaps you're somebody who has 2 mothers. You're somebody who's living with a disability and longs to engage another in conversation about the joys of that life. Perhaps you're a person of color who grew up in rural Iowa. They're with us, and I encourage us to find them. So please don't settle. Please don't not take the time to be someone who peels away difference. Find the time to be or find another cultural guide. So think about who are those people in your life and how you might find somebody to help you get to know one. And I might say if you're somebody who says, those people are singers, you might just join a choir. Because I think a flavorful, artistic, non-settling community where people play yo-yo and where rivers of difference can be crossed depends on it. Thank you very much.